Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. Okay, it's so glad to have you on Life Support. What we do in our program is we love to tell stories. We tell stories about people that have been redeemed by Christ, how he enters into our lives, and we also talk to influential people who are really trying to change our world for him. And we're going to talk with someone like that today. And her name is Gina Evans. She's the Director of Government Relations for Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. And Gina, it's so good to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Paul.
Our church, Ridgewood Church, is a big fan of Teen Challenge, and what the organization does is amazing, and it works. And a lot of people's lives are changed. Tell me how you got involved with this, and what aspect of your life really is tuned into what you're trying to do right now.
I feel like Teen Challenge saved my life. And in July, I will have been there 20 years as an employee. It's a really long time. How I got to Teen Challenge was through a series of unfortunate events. John 10:10 says that the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And I spent about, 20 years, IV meth use, drugs, crime, showing other people how to do drugs and crime. And so the last time that I went to prison, I've been to prison 3 different times. Drug possession, forgery, all of that kind of stuff. And the last time I went to prison, I had an encounter with Jesus. And I never was one of those people that would go to jail and find Jesus and then leave him there. I actually felt like religion was a crutch for weak-minded people, and like I had all these ideas. And so I had a spiritual experience with God, and through my children, actually. All the bad things that could happen to somebody from drug use, jail, prison. I lost my kids to the system. All of that stuff happened to me. And the last time I was in prison, my mom made a decision for my children to put them up for adoption, and found a family, and they were gone. Part of the adoption agreement was that I wouldn't be able to see them until they were 18, and only if they wanted to. And I started going to this Bible study, and asked the people that were teaching it. It was these amazing older people that came every week, no matter what. And I asked him, how do I get what you have? And he said, pray. Pray and ask God for what you need. And I didn't know how to pray. I was in prison and was just like, if you're real, show me the money. That's the best I had, right?
Sure.
In April of 2003, I called home to wish May of 2003. I called home to wish my mom a happy Mother's Day, and she said, Gina, are you sitting down? And I figured somebody was dead or whatever, my dad. And she said, the kids are back home. The people that adopted them decided that it wasn't God's plan for them to be parents. And I just burst into tears. And my mom said, it's okay, baby, we're going to adopt them, it'll be fine. And I just said, Mama, I'm not crying because I'm sad. God brought my kids home to me. And she was like, easy, right?
Yeah.
I was still in prison and all of that. And so when I got out, I went to Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge and spent a year there. I think learning who Christ was really important, but I think the bigger, more transformational thing for me was really understanding who I am in Christ. So I spent a year there and then got out and went to college, and I have never looked back.
Wow, good for you. A lot of people who aren't familiar with what goes on in prisons just kind of write people off, or just assume that they've ruined their lives and good luck kind of thing, because there's such a view of what goes on there that's not realistic based on movies and television and all those things. Tell me what is God doing inside prison walls right now that you can relate to and that you experienced?
So I'm really glad that you all are in there digitally, because it's so easy for the administration when they're understaffed or when there's issues to get rid of programming. And so for me, programming was a huge part of like the change for me. One of the classes that I took while I was in prison was called Parenting with Purpose. My friends Lori and Paul Strong come in and talk about biblical parenting, not just parenting, but biblical parenting. And they were the ones that encouraged me to go to Teen Challenge. Some of the other stuff that anger management and all of that stuff, but it's so limited, right? The programming that the prisons are able to provide. And so having programming like this be available on pads or however folks are accessing them makes God possible, right? No matter what, even if programming is shut down. So that was super encouraging to me. One of the things that I know is that, religious programming is one of the things that I feel like goes last, and there's more of it. But my husband and I were both really enamored by volunteers that go into the jails and prisons. Their dedication, that Marilyn and Ellis were the Bible study leaders that used to go into Shakopee, and I couldn't rattle that guy. And I tried. Like, I would ask all these snarky questions, and like it says, I would read the homework they gave us just to be able to come back and argue with them, right?
Yeah.
And so it says this in the Old Testament and this in the New Testament, and it's all malarkey, right? And he would come back right at me and be like, Jesus is the bridge. Jesus, like this, it's about love. It's, and I didn't even care if what he believed was real at the end of that. I just wanted to believe in anything the way he believed in the power of God and prayer. And so, and God showed up. God showed up. And so God bless all the volunteers that go in and share the Lord with.
I think that's something that not a lot of people know is this kind of thing is going on all over the country. And there are very dedicated people who are reaching out to those who are like you and have a future ahead, but just need to learn about Jesus and that there's hope beyond what they can see. And that these aren't these lost institutions full of people that are going nowhere. There's a lot of people praying, and there are a lot of people volunteering their time, and there's people giving money. And you mentioned this program. This program appears on an app that inmates can receive. And it's part of Christian programming. They have choices, and they can download our content, and a lot of them have. I get letters from all over the country, and I think we hit at least Five Stone hit 3 million downloads of their content in prisons, and so it's really cool. So now you're outside. You're working now to be an advocate. You're basically a lobbyist, you said. I don't know if that's a good term to use. Well, a Christian lobbyist, a lobbyist for Jesus. How's that? Not for money, like so many are. So tell me, what are the things that you're concerned about, and what are the things that you're talking to our state legislators about?
Yep. So currently it's about funding treatment. But prior to that, I was on the board for the Minnesota Second Chance Coalition and did a lot of work around background study. Once you commit a crime and are incarcerated, folks will tell you you can never have this job or that job, and that's true for some crimes, but generally there are time frames associated with how long you can or can't be a drug and alcohol counselor or be a nurse, and so when I originally got into the work of advocating at the legislature, it was because they told me that I was permanently disqualified from working with vulnerable adults and children because of my termination of parental rights. And I hurt my kids. I left them with my parents and didn't come back. And abandoned them, and then was in prison for the hearing for my termination. And so they actually terminated my rights involuntarily, which is what they do with people who have committed violence against children and other stuff like that. And so I went to my local legislator and just said, hey, here's how this is impacting me. Here's my story, here's my kids, all of that. And so we put together a bill to make it so that it didn't matter if it was voluntary or involuntary. They had to consider a set-aside for a civil, because it's civil. Termination of parental rights is civil law. And then after that, I was hooked. Like, if somebody like me, just through the help of my local legislature, can get something accomplished that not just impacts me, but impacts all the people coming behind me, I want to be part of that. And since then, I have done a ton of work. I helped with the Clean Slate Act. So after 5 years from release from supervision, some crimes get wiped clean, nonviolent, drugs, forgery, that kind of stuff. They're automatically expunged. And then also some stuff around the new Pardon Commission and the pardon rules around pardoning. So I worked on all of that stuff. I have a pretty long list of things that I've championed. Restore the vote. So in Minnesota now, either you're out and can vote, or you're incarcerated and can't. There's no supervision mandate that you have to complete supervision. So it's just some of the stuff I've worked on. But justice, things should be fair, even for folks who have previously been incarcerated.
Yeah, and you were saying that both Democrats and Republicans are working on some of each and don't necessarily always get along, which is a big shock to people. But are you able to develop relationships on both sides of the aisle and try to, model Christ and unity and those types of things?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that makes me effective down at the Capitol is because I look for areas of agreement. And I just am who I am. Like, I share my story all the time, and I don't know that I'm your typical lobbyist, because I'm down there fighting for the things that impact people that are still living a life of struggle. And I don't think you can disagree. You can discount facts or data, but it's my story, right?
Right. They can't argue with your story. Why does God want people like you and me to be involved with helping those who are struggling, those who are suffering, those who are in situations that you're dealing with?
So the rest of John 10:10 says, and he has come to bring life, for you to have life and have it abundantly. And I think that it all leads to that, right? For me, it's being an example of what life can look like. I had 13 felony convictions. I've been to Shakopee Women's Prison 3 different times. Lost my kids, like all the bad things, right? And so if I can come up out of that pit and then not just come up out of it, but then be on the other side of it, helping change laws and be a good example for not just for the people coming behind me, but for the legislature, right?
Right.
To be able to say, yeah, but I testify down there quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's our call, right? To love God and to love others and to share the gospel, like through our testimonies. That's the call.
Yeah, good for you.
That's the mission.
Yep. Gina Evans is our guest. She's the Director of Government Relations for Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. And what kind of receptivity are you receiving? And are things a little bit, let's say, kind of off the rails, and are people distracted because of what's happened in the past year or so in Minnesota? And if you don't live in Minnesota, I'm sure you've heard about it, because I get texts from my friends all over the place saying, "Oh, you live in Minnesota." I think we're famous for all the wrong reasons right now. But how has that affected what you do?
It's pretty wild. I think everybody is doing the best they can with the information that they have. And I reserve the right to learn new information and change my mind. But that is not the way of politics right now. Like people, our government is run by the 10% of the more extreme on each end. And I think the rest of us are somewhere in the middle. And, finding things in times like this, divisive times like this, that we can all agree on is the best way to do advocacy. So Teen Challenge just put together a 3-series podcast called Are We Leaving Our Kids Behind? And it's about the lack of adolescent treatment in the country. Like, we do these pendulum swings politically, and it went from all kids should be at home. That's evidence-based practices. We don't want them in institutions. We don't want them in programs. So all these programs closed down, and now there are these families that need help. Their kids need to go somewhere to get well, away from their environment, away from their school, sometimes away from their parents that are part of the problem, right? And so, we're working right now to make sure that the funding is there to ensure kids need the help that they deserve,
right?
And the parents get the break that they need. Hennepin County spent millions of dollars in 2023 sending children out of state for care because Minnesota doesn't have the care that they need. And so we put together a series. The first one was a couple weeks ago called The State of the State, and we had some folks from the DHS and some organizations that support programs come and talk about kind of where we're at, level set. And then the next one's going to be on the impact. So we'll have some folks that represent families and some programs in the county. Hennepin County is going to come share some data with us. And then the last one we're going to do is going to be a solutions panel with legislators and all that stuff. So in my mind, how you operate during times like this is you find something everybody can agree on,
Sure.
and then get everybody to the table and figure, if people are involved with the solutions, you create that buy-in. And
Right.
we don't want to leave our kids behind, and it costs more to fund adolescent care, and so working on it.
Yeah, good for you. That's good. What would you say to, no one says this explicitly, but there are people who have basically given up on the world and are waiting for Jesus to come back. It seems like that's a kind of a prevalent attitude within our evangelical churches. The world's done. People are never going to change. I want to go to heaven. You're not doing that. You're involved. You're trying to make changes. What would you say to someone who has sort of like thrown in the towel?
I mean, to be clear, Jesus can come back anytime. I'm ready. And I think every generation before us has thought that same thing for a multitude of crises that happened in that generation. And, God didn't call us to sit and wait. He called us to serve and give and preach the gospel and, do whatever he's called you to do. If God's calling you to be a stay-at-home mom, be the best stay-at-home mom that you can be. If God's calling you to, but in all things, we are to preach the gospel. And for me, that means doing the next right thing all the time.
Right.
And then if somebody asks me what's different about me, I'm able to share the gospel in that space. But for some, he's called them to be on a street corner.
Yeah.
So
just be who God called you to be. And don't give up. Just keep plugging away.
Yep. There's still work to be done.
There's still work to be done. And you have influence with people who do have influence. So it's kind of cool how God put you there. Do you find people are receptive to who you are, and when you do have an opportunity to share, do people look at you funny, or do they know you well enough to go like, wow, she does have something there?
Yes, all those things.
All those things, yeah.
I think the most, not visceral, maybe visceral reaction I get is from, folks that are incarcerated or people who are, newly in recovery or whatever. When I share my story, I think people are a little bit shocked because I don't I don't look like that anymore. I don't sound like that anymore, but I promise I did.
Yeah.
And so, and I feel like that gives me credibility with folks that are, still living that life. But then also because I've come so far and have been in this work in the, kind of at that intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health, I also have some credibility there because I've been there and done the things and had the jobs and did the work.
Yeah. So someone's listening right now that wants to help out and lend a hand or financially or whatever to Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge. How would someone say, I want to do that. I want to help?
Yeah, we have lots of opportunities to help at Teen Challenge, whether it's volunteering or mentoring, or if you have a business and you want to come paint some walls or do some landscaping, or give. Like we aren't able to provide Christian programming at Teen Challenge on a government dime. We get a stipend for board and lodge, and the rest of it we have to raise through the faith community. And so every dollar matters. I couldn't have afforded to pay for Teen Challenge when I went there. And so if you go to the website, www.mntc.org, and click on help, there's a button. We make giving very easy.
And how can we pray for you?
So, my mom had triple bypass surgery yesterday, and my husband is a paramedic and is out putting himself in harm's way all the time. And so you always can be praying for my family and health, wealth, and wisdom. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, because you're just sitting around the house kicking your feet up, aren't you? You're doing such a great job.
We also have a hobby farm and 100 chickens and
my goodness,
a garden in the summertime. And we're busy folks.
Yes, you are. But you're doing a great job. Thanks so much for stopping by. We really enjoyed meeting you.